Hi everyone, this is Zorina at Grownlearn.org. I have the pleasure to have Marc Azoulay with me. Marc is a psychotherapist in Boulder, Colorado, and he's helping teams in a very interesting way, in a psychotherapy kind of way. He's not simply doing organizational development in the traditional way, but he's bringing the interpretation of family dynamics into workplaces. So he's actually analyzing the individuals' baggage from their family dynamics and seeing how this impacts work relationships. So I'm very pleased to have you, Marc.
Really happy to be here.
I know that you're also, you have started a few nonprofits, and these are in the health and mental health and educational space. So what drew you, or what made you start up these nonprofit companies, and how are they related to the work you're providing to corporations?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. Most of them I started were educational, helping therapists become better. I found that, I'm a therapist in private practice, which means the impact I make is pretty small. I mean, my caseload is about 30 people. I run a couple groups that have 6 people, and that's considered full, if not, kind of on the heavier side of full. But I wanted to bring more of that education to more people and have greater impact. So I wanted to create nonprofits that educate people. I wanted to help leaders, help entrepreneurs, help startup founders, help managers to get these skills and take them out of what is, frankly, an ivory tower of psychology and disperse it more into the world. So people are armed with the skills and the, knowledge that they need to be better leaders, right? Everybody out there has had a bad boss, right? And a bad boss can ruin your life. So my whole thing is like, if I can make bosses better, it will really trickle down and help make companies and corporations better.
Mm-hmm. So could it be that the boss was not necessarily bad, but the way you perceived the boss was bad because of your own family dynamics? It could be not necessarily the leader, but also the follower.
Absolutely, in both ways, right?
Yeah, right.
I think that's a lot what I talk about, is that our family dynamics get overlaid on top of any small group. And what analysis describes as a small group is 5 people, which is kind of a typical team. So once you get 5 people together, all of a sudden you're not interacting with them. You're interacting with your mother, your father, your siblings, right? All that dynamic is going to come out, and it's going to be moving towards authority. So if you're a leader, you're going to get a lot of people's parental issues. If you are the leader, you're going to be projecting maybe some of your sibling issues onto them, and it gets really messy really fast.
Wow. Have you always observed this in all kinds of teams, no matter how great the policies are in a company? Do you always observe that?
It happens with every single person. Of course, policies and structure can do a lot to mitigate it, right? But the idea is that we're not robots, we're humans. So even if you have a policy and you have a team, there's no way the leader is going to be treating every single person identically, right? That's impossible. There's always going to be a favorite. There's always going to be the one that they're annoyed by. There's always going to be the one they're like maybe a little bit attracted to. All these things are going to come into play. And by taking the psychology lens, we can understand where that comes from and help leaders become free of those influences, so they can actually try to be more objective and try to be more fair, right? Try to be more equitable.
And so what exactly do you do when you go in a team? How do you interact with them, or how do you train them to recognize these patterns?
Yeah, there's a couple steps in the process. The first is I go straight to the top, right? Go to the C-suite people, go to the manager, go to the team leader, right? Go to the CEO if possible. I need to get buy-in from them, because if I don't get buy-in from them, everything is going to crumble. So I usually work with them individually for, 3 to 5 sessions. And what I'm doing is collecting information about them, but I'm really judging their ability to take feedback, right? I'm seeing, okay, are they open about their childhood? Can they tell me about a mistake that they made? Are they aware? Are they able to have what's called metacognition, which means, thinking about thinking, right? Are they able to see the pattern and not take it personally? If a leader is able to do that, then the company has hope. If the leader is very defensive or willfully ignorant, or unable to take these things in, or doesn't buy in, then, the process kind of ends right there. Luckily, I work. Oh, good.
Are you able in some cases to turn the leaders around, or the way they think, or do you believe that it's a very long process and kind of impossible because it's inherent?
I can usually get them to open up, but they typically the ones that are more successful have had some kind of personal work in the past.
Right.
So maybe they've worked with a coach before, maybe they've had a spiritual or religious practice where they have introspection, maybe they've been to therapy before. I have a benefit because there's a lot of tech startups in Boulder, Colorado, and it tends to be people that I think are a little bit younger, a little bit more open to this, people that understand the dynamics. And when I have some examples that I rattle off, they're like, oh yeah, like I'm definitely that person. I really do favor women over men, right? Because I'm attracted to them, right? Or yeah, like older men, like I push them away because I really didn't respect my dad growing up. If I can find a little pattern that are very common and they can connect to it, then there's some hope. Then there's some chance for them to do the work.
Right. And do you see a change immediately after they recognize it? Because some people recognize a pattern and then they stop there. They don't really work on it. Or maybe they recognize it for a bit and then they retract back to their previous way of perceiving the world.
Yeah, that's very common. So what often happens in analysis is called catharsis, which means a big emotion, right? So say, oh my God, it's just like my dad. And they cry or they, have a feeling. And that's the first important part because those emotions burst forward. Then kind of what you were alluding to before, then we have to institute policy. We have to look at structure. We have to create systems that they can start to counteract what their natural tendency will be. The idea is that you have to retrain your unconscious. You have to retrain your brain to be more communicative or be more transparent, or maybe you're afraid of your boss, so you have to set up systems to be like, okay, I'm going to check in with them no matter what, even though I'm afraid. So I really work on some of that nuts and bolts stuff as well, to be like, okay, here's how we start to overcome these patterns, knowing that your default is to go back, right? Let's work on creating a new system, and over time it will become natural.
Can you share a story that you've recently or at any point had that was that you can share, in a anonymous way, of course, that showed the impact of this approach?
Absolutely. I can do a case study that's a combination of a few clients, not to, betray any of them, but something that is quite common for high performers. So you have a client who grew up in a difficult childhood, right? Oftentimes their parents were alcoholics, or maybe they were mentally ill. Their home was not very safe. We're not talking about, quote, serious abuse, right? They weren't getting hit or, sexually assaulted or anything, but it was just kind of a neglectful, not very rewarding home, right? What the person does is they throw everything into school. And this is really common for high performers, is that they throw everything into school because in school they're getting loved, they're getting accepted, they're getting validated, they have friends, and they excel, right? They excel, they move forward, they do great in college, maybe they go to grad school, they start a company or get a good job. But then they've been trained that performance equals love, that if they're not performing, they're not worthy of love. And many people will live in this way until about their 30s, until they realize that they're not getting those kudos anymore. And they come to me as a therapist and they're like, oh, I'm 35. I've checked all the boxes. I have the job. I have the car, I have the nice house, but I don't have any friends. I don't have a partner and I'm miserable. What's going on? And many of these people we come to, kind of fast forward, they come to this idea where they use their team, or in many cases their company, to create that family that they never had, to create a place where they can feel love, they can feel admiration, they can feel acceptance, they can feel belonging, they can feel important. But I'd be curious what you think about this. But from my approach, that's actually not appropriate for the workplace. You actually can't get love in that way in the workplace. And with the boss constantly seeking love and attention, what happens to that person is they often come to the pleasing behavior. They feel drained by the end of the day. They feel like they're fake, that they're acting. They have trouble saying no to things because they just want everyone to like them and love them and care about them. And they end up burning out.
Yeah.
So in the work that I do, I help to make them aware of that, to go through the long psychological but very powerful process of grieving the childhood and then building love into their real life. Right? Getting out and dating somebody, which for them is like, you might have met these people who are very confident, in the boardroom. But when it comes to being on a dating app, right, or meeting someone new, they just shrink because they have no training in this. So the idea is, helping them find love, create belonging, create family.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've spoken to quite a few high level organization, high people in an organization, and when you come to a personal conversation, they are much more sensitive and willing to share than people would normally. So they open up much faster. It's like they need somebody to talk to. They need somebody to understand them, and yeah, it's true that on the surface they seem like. Or they are constantly seeking approval, and people perceive them as ego driven, but this is what they are in the end, seeking approval and seeking love. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And it comes from that wounding from the family.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see how they project that onto their workplace, which over time can become quite toxic because it's not the employee's job to love their boss.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Okay, great. Perfect. So how can people find you if they need your help in organizational development or personal psychotherapy?
Yeah, the best way is to go to my website, which is marc-azoulay.com, and everything is there. I have all my links to my social media. I do videos with a couple colleagues every week. I have blogs, book recommendations. It's kind of the hub for everything that I do.
Great. So we'll be having you for the upcoming online summit, the new game of leadership in February 21. And but we'll be coming with more information on the webinar. But thank you so much for also agreeing to join. It's going to be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the quick chat.